A Pennsylvania lawmaker's idea to make the anxious generation less anxious on Inside Story right now. Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt O'Donnell. It is Sunday, May 26, 2024, and thanks for joining us here on Inside Story, and happy Memorial Day weekend. To start this discussion, first you have to ask the question, are America's youth truly in a crisis? If so, it leads you to a second question. What is causing it? Maybe it has been lying in front of us all along. More and more researchers, parents, and teachers are becoming convinced that children these days are more depressed, struggle more academically and socially, and are more likely to prefer playing alone with a screen than in person with their peers. A new book comes to that conclusion, presents two seismic causes, and offers simple solutions. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist who received his PhD at the University of Pennsylvania, was just published this year. It is already making the rounds in homes and in schools as the book offers a convincing argument through much research that two things recently went wrong with children, leading them to their constant anxious state. First, in the 1990s, parents became less willing to allow their children to play outside on their own and more likely to structure their playtime. Then Haidt says something much worse happened beginning in 2010. Children suddenly had the entire internet in the palms of their hands with the emergence of smartphones and social media apps. That, Haidt strongly believes, is where this anxious generation, as he calls it, went haywire. What to do then? A Pennsylvania state senator says the answer is simple. Reduce young children's access to smartphones, particularly in school where they are supposed to be learning, not scrolling. Joining us now on Inside Story is State Senator Ryan Aument from the 36th District in Lancaster County. Aument also serves as the Majority Whip for the Senate's Republican Caucus. Senator, thanks for joining us here on Inside Story.
Matt, so good to be with you.
Senator, you have two children, 13-year-old son, 11-year-old daughter. Do they have cell phones? And if not, how hard has it been?
They do not. So I have a 13-year-old son, Jack, who's in the 7th grade, and a 11-year-old daughter, June, who is in 4th grade. And so I'm an unpopular dad in some respects because we have pushed off the smartphone. And after seeing some of the research in Dr. Haidt's book, we're likely to push that off even further. And this is a critically important issue. Our kids are not doing well, and we're spending a lot of money on K through 12 education, a lot of money on mental health treatment and services in schools, which we should, but we've got to start addressing some of these root causes, some of these root issues.
Let's talk about your bill. I have it right here. What you propose is just two things. Require the use of secure, lockable phone bags. Sometimes people use yonders for those at concerts in all Pennsylvania public schools. And number two, establish a pilot program to secure funding for these lockable phone bags and track any changes in mental health, bullying, self-harm, and academic performance. If this bill is passed, how would a child's day look like? Let's say a child's on the bus, has a cell phone, arrives at school. What happens then?
Yeah, the heart of the proposal that I have is really a grant program that school districts would be able to enact local policies, which they can do today. And many are really beginning to explore this now. It's a very difficult conversation in communities, a very difficult conversation with students and parents. But many schools see the distraction that these phones present in school, the number of notifications that students are receiving, the lack of attention span among our young people, the mental health crisis that is impacting so many of our young people, feelings of isolation and depression and anxiety, the reported cases of attempted self-harm and attempted suicide. And this directly correlates with the rise of widespread smartphone access and social media access. And so what we're seeking to do is give local school districts the tools so that if in fact they are willing to take this step to free our kids for 6.5 hours during the school day completely from smartphone access, from social media access during the schools, that we will provide grant funding so they can purchase these safe pouches, lockers, where the phones can be secured. So the school day, for a school that wishes to participate in this program, a student would enter the school building, would immediately, as per a local policy, have the phone secured in one of these secure smartphone pouches or lockers, and would not have access to that phone throughout the entire school day. And then we also want to collect data so that we can see what the impact is. Do we see, as I suspect we will, an improvement on the school culture and the school environment, or on academic performance and with students' mental health? Let's collect that data in this pilot program, and then use that information then to expand this program statewide, which is certainly the direction that I would like to move. But initially, it's a grant program that preserves local decision making, but let's free our kids during the school hours from these phones.
Senator, there is pushback, and it really is in two areas. Number one, not all researchers agree that smartphones and social media are directly causing depression and distress among youth, and they say that the data, when they look at it, is conflicting at best. And the other pushback is a lot of people in the science community say that the medical community began measuring depression and other mental health episodes differently, particularly after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, and so that the data has been skewed since then. So how do you respond to that?
Well, I think most parents and grandparents look at the data, and the data is confirming what they are seeing and what they already know. There has been a dramatic increase in the mental health crisis since 2012, the rise of smartphone access, widespread smartphone access, and social media. You look at and Dr. Haidt and the Anxious Generation has done a phenomenal job with this. And I've had the opportunity to interact and speak with Dr. Haidt, and what I appreciate is that he invites criticism, he invites critique and challenge to his research, and I think he is able to refute much of these false claims. I think in a really effective manner, but he invites the criticism and the challenging these assumptions. But all the data, I think, is pretty clear: a decline in academic performance, an increase in the mental health crisis, the feelings of depression and anxiety, and again, attempted self-harm, attempted suicide, self-harm. But parents are seeing it. The data is affirming what parents are already experiencing. I have to tell you, just since I've introduced the co-sponsorship memo, I've heard from teachers, I've heard from school administrators, and I've heard from grassroots parents organizations who want to join this effort, who say, thank you. Finally, somebody is seeking to address this issue. We're trying to address the issue at home, but then our kids go to school and for 6 and a half hours, have access to the phones, to social media, and they see the consequences of this.
One more thing, and real quick if you can, Senator, what do you tell parents who say, I just want to be able to text with my child in school, I see violent episodes happen in schools, and I'm worried that I won't be able to contact them in that case?
Look, I think the school safety aspect of this is probably the most emotionally challenging issue to confront. What I would encourage parents to think about is, if there is an incident, an emergency at school, the most effective response is to have an adult, a responsible adult, responding and also communicating to students, and students not being distracted when an adult is giving them directions in that situation. The last thing you want, actually, in an emergency, is to have 500 kids trying to contact their parents, or to make a call, or to take video. It leads to a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion, and school safety experts will tell you that.
Yeah. I know you served your country. Want to wish you a happy Memorial Day, Senator, and thank you for joining us here on Inside Story. Senator Ryan Aument from Lancaster County.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Yeah, good to be with you, and we'll be back with our panel next. Everyone's cell phone is in a yonder right now. Okay, let's introduce our panelists here. Charmaine Matlock-Turner, CEO of Urban Affairs Coalition.
Hi, Matt.
Charmaine. Allison Young, Managing Partner, RBW Strategy.
Good morning, Matt.
Brian Tierney, CEO, Brian Communications. Good morning. Hey, Brian. And Jeff Jubilaire, Vice President, Bellevue Communications.
Morning, Matt.
Brian, you're an ad man. You've spent your whole career trying to reach people. Now you can do it very easily, right? What's your view on this?
My view on it is wonderful what the state senator has done. I mean, a couple things. The U.S. Surgeon General a year or so ago said kids should not spend more than 3 hours a day on social media. The average person, though, young person, is spending 3.5 hours. This past week, I had the opportunity, because of other things, I was with Madeline Bell, the CEO of CHOP, and Rob Brooks, the CEO of St. Christopher's Hospital for Children. Both of them were talking about how 10 years ago you were seeing peds occasionally, or not occasionally, unfortunately, in the 14, 15, 16-year-old age group trying to commit suicide. Now they're seeing 8 and 9-year-olds. We, as a system, this all started in 2010. We don't know the impact of this yet, but we're seeing it. There's facts. It's a horrible impact, and we need to do something, because those 10-year-olds, picture the impact over the next 50, 60, 70 years of their life, too.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
We have young children here on this side of the table.
Is 16, 17 young? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Younger than us.
They have strong opinions.
They do. Okay.
Yeah. And frankly, I talked to them the other day about this, and they go to public school, and their teachers, they put their phones in yonders during class. And I said, what do you think of this? And I said, take away how you want it, but how do you feel about it? And they clap back a little bit. And what they said is, okay, so I've got my Microsoft Surface out, I've got my computer out during class, because we use computers and laptops during class, which we think we should because we're engaging, and we could just pop on social media there. Now, could you turn off the sites? So all you're doing is playing a cat and mouse game. To me, and we're going to talk more about this, which is wonderful, it's about, they have this phrase and teaching of media literacy.
Okay.
I think it has to do with, this is real, they're going to take it out as soon as they get home from school, and they're going to use it whether you tell them not to or not, unless you ban it. So let's teach them how to use it responsibly and the dangers of it, which I know everyone is for as well. I struggle with the concept of you'll just ban it and things will get better.
Okay, Charmaine, you encourage young people to work.
Yep.
Mentorism. What do you see with this?
Well, the first thing, Matt, I want to say is that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I really want to thank you for bringing this topic, because it's really important for us to sort of understand, no matter what the tools are out there that can disrupt how people are living and not living healthy, we need to make sure that we're talking about it. And I think the good thing about mental health and mental health awareness is that we now see these issues as a healthcare issue and not a behavioral issue. So it's not just kids are doing this in school and they're not good people, as opposed to what are the real challenges that they're facing. And some of it is certainly coming through technology, but it's coming through other tools as well. So I think number one is for us to really stay focused on how important it is for us to promote mental health. And one of the big tools there, which I think is the same thing as we talk about this topic, is to engage people in conversation about it, which is why, again, this is very, very important. I'm probably on the side of let's educate as opposed to legislate, but I definitely believe that we have a lot of work to do in really understanding this issue and making sure that there are opportunities available to really work on this issue. I do want to say one thing about schools right now. I reached out to several schools and took a look at some of the data. Most schools, between 75 and 90%, have some kind of policy in place about not having cell phones being used during the school day.
But is it enforced?
Right. Well, I talked to a principal who said, yeah, absolutely, it's being enforced, but the question that you raised, and especially for kids a lot of times in cities, I asked this principal, I said, what about the ones who are pushing back? What are you doing? She said, look, you're now going to ask the teachers to be police. You're giving them another police job. Right now, they're working on a new system where they're bringing in a K-8 school a metal detector because they're concerned about weapons. So now you're asking them to put on top of that to be able to do that. And a couple parents pushed back and said, look, what if, and I think you raised that question, what if someone comes into this school, and a school shooting, and my child no longer has the ability to communicate, and get help and support. So I'm not for it. So
Okay.
there's a lot of education that
Allison,
needs to go.
as a Republican, I'm sure you're for more regulation.
But it's why
Headline.
I appreciate this show and this topic in particular, Matt, because of course, my general instinct is to be like, we don't need to regulate this, leave this up to the schools. However, I think that this is one of these topics where the protection of children becomes the supreme argument here. And I think one of the things that we can do with this topic that Jeff and Charmaine started to get to, or that is to scratch, that I think we can go deeper, is it's not simply about policing the content. This is, and Dr. Haidt addresses this in the book, this is about our passive engagement with technology and how it's changing our behaviors, how it's leading to disconnection. And one of the most important, I am the mother of a daughter, so one of the most important, I think, factors to look at here is this affects girls more than boys. And in particular, his research gets really deep into the lack of connection and the lack of engagement with community and the structures in our community. So ultimately, the group that it affects the most are children of lesser means and secular liberal girls, those that don't have those other community connections. This kind of research, I think, is really fundamental to understanding where the intervention is needed.
Let me interject this. So you mentioned the book, Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation, and you heard what the senator is proposing in his bill. Jonathan Haidt suggests these things: no smartphones for children before high school, only flip phones in middle school, no social media before the age of 16, and that would be enforced by the companies and possibly by law. Make schools phone free, give children more free play and independence and better recess. What do you think about these suggestions?
I love the suggestions, but it has to be across the board. And I think it's just very difficult to say we're going to ban cell phone use or smartphone use until you're 16. I think it's a wish list, and I think, listen, he's incredibly intelligent and has great data. I just think it has to do with education again and responsible use. By the way, as parents and grandparents, we have to model that behavior.
Exactly. Yeah.
100%.
Because it's not just about taking,
yes.
it's
That's
not
a
just
very
about
good
taking
point.
the technology away. It's about replacing it with play.
Right.
In that how, and one of the other points that, clearly I'm a Jonathan Haidt fan here, but one of the other points that he makes is that replacing it with play also teaches kids skills like negotiation and conflict resolution, which we've taken away, not just by giving them cell phones, but by over-regulating how they play and the rules by which they play. And so giving them back this play-based childhood actually teaches them things like conflict resolution and negotiation, which one might argue is essential for a functioning democracy.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's an excellent
Soapbox.
point where parents are hooked on these things too.
Right,
They're
I was
on
going
a
to say
stroller
the
and
same
a
thing.
smartphone
Right,
there,
exactly.
right?
I mean, I see people walking across the street in terrible traffic. I'm like at the corner, and I'm like seeing someone's pushing a stroller with the, with this. So I definitely think, again, it's getting back to educating all of us about something that, as you said, we're only into 15 years into this space, where all of us are not doing what we should be doing as it relates to, I drive by somebody in a car, they're doing like this. I'm like, okay, this
No
is
one ever
definitely not
goes when
safe.
the light turns green.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Because they're looking at this screen.
I was out at a restaurant recently. Mom, dad, children, 8, 12. The oldest looked like about 18. All 6 of them on the phone.
Yeah.
Here they are out to dinner.
crazy.
And
Here
in
they are,
terms of
but not
regulations,
there.
we don't allow people to have alcohol till they're 18 or 21, right? We
Yeah.
banned that because we thought there was a health impact. This is something, again, new to society. It didn't exist before 2010, but the stats are scary as all get out. And I think it helps parents who are trying to control it if we're saying when you get to school, your phone has to go into. It would be horrible to have a school shooting and not being able, but the fact of the matter, that is one out of, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of school days, millions of school days, versus this is a day-to-day, and we're seeing suicide up, depression up, more for girls too, which is really scary.
Now, and you mentioned those. Some
and I'm a
scientists,
Republican. I was in the Reagan administration.
some scientists do believe that the data can be interpreted in different ways, and maybe the spectrum is too wide, and that's why we've seen certain incidents go up. And also, we said this about radio, about newspapers, about the printing press, about the telegraph, about the TV and
Absolutely.
the internet.
Yes.
What if,
Since I
what
remember
if
the
this is
beginning of
not the
TV.
problem?
Well, I got to tell you, the first thing I would when I heard that certain scholars have done, I'd like to look at their funding. Okay.
I love the skepticism,
I
Brian.
love it because I wouldn't be surprised that, well, we got a little money from TikTok, but it's not, here or there. But anyway, but that's something you really need, because those companies are, appropriately, perhaps not TikTok, but are funding a lot of research.
They have a lot of money to do
Yeah,
that.
but
trying to
let me
show
tell you
that-
what some schools are doing. Some schools are doing something what they call an agreement. Again, they're trying to ultimately create something where there is common agreement on what is there, as opposed to coming in and saying, okay, it's got to be this, you got to do it this way, you got to do it this way. It's ultimately trying to say what ultimately would work for our school. So even
Some
though I
leniency
don't
is
have
what
like a
you're saying.
6-year-old or a 7-year-old, I do have a 12-year-old grandson. So I checked in to see, okay, what's going on at his school. He does have a smartphone. He's 12. He's able to take it in. They have a locker right in his classroom. They are allowed to play with whatever they're playing with up until 8:15. At that point, they go in. They all lock their phones in the classroom. If you have an iPad or something, it has to go in your backpack. It has to go in your locker, and you get it at the end of the day. The parents have all agreed to this and said, okay, this seems to make sense. At the same time, they're teaching about how you can use these tools in a way that adds to play. So you know what he watches when I go down and say, hey, what are you doing? What are you watching? He goes, oh, I'm into fishing. So I'm now watching. So he's now watching this guy
So he's watching
somewhere
healthy
out
stuff.
somewhere.
Yeah.
He's
Matt,
like fishing.
You know, we need more camp.
More camp.
I'm
It's
a
summer
camp
camp
person.
season.
My daughters go to
Sure.
camp. I wish we could have camp all year round, but we have to have school.
Oh, they
No
do.
cell
Camp,
service.
no
Camp,
phones.
no phones
No
at camp.
phones
Yeah,
for
he did
8
go to
weeks.
no phone camp.
Let
Yeah,
me,
he
let
did
me,
do
let,
that.
let
Yeah.
me give you a couple anecdotes
They're
I heard.
happy as can be.
Yes. He
I
was
did a
very
story
happy.
about
That is
people.
true.
I did a story about people who do not own cell phones, like literally
Love it.
do not own them. And I went on and talked to people about it, and you know what they said? 2 things. Every single person: I hate my phone, and I can't live without it. Now, when it comes to TikTok, I overheard a young parent saying, if they ban TikTok, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I hope they do because I don't want my kids on it. How do we have this? this
There's so much
paradox?
misinformation out there too, as well. So not only is it the impact of social media, all this, there's so much misinformation that somebody says, "Well, I saw it on TikTok," and
Right,
like Brian
right.
Tierney's head is made of cottage cheese.
Right,
I saw
right,
something about
right,
it.
right.
TikTok
I
is
can
an
confirm it's
interesting
not.
topic, Matt, because this gets into the lobbying and why we're having so much trouble with this. Because I was reading an article yesterday that there are, among like NetChoice and X and Meta, they employ a lobbyist for every 4 congressmen. Like, big tech is influential in Washington. And a couple weeks
That's an
ago,
amazing ratio, by the way.
right?
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, Senator Sanders from Arkansas sent this book, The Anxious Generation, to all of her governor colleagues and said, we've got to do something, because she did try to pass a law in Arkansas to limit cell phone use in schools. And then the courts, there are 3 district courts, I think it's Arkansas, California, and Ohio, if I'm not mistaken, that enjoined laws, and big tech won here. And I think it was a NetChoice was behind it. But to prevent these laws from going into place, and they're saying that they're taking away cell phones is infringing on free speech rights.
So that's the obstacle. I mean,
That's the
here,
obstacle.
right?
They're
But I
making
think
so
that,
much
like,
money off
but
this.
I ultimately think where this winds up in the Supreme Court probably is because I don't think it's constitutionally sound to say that the protection of children online is less important than the free speech rights of big corporations.
Real quick final thought. Is this going to happen?
Well,
Does
real
Senator
quick,
Allman have a
real
chance?
quick, you talk about free speech. There is free speech, but when you're in law school, as I was, you learn, but you can't cry a fire in a crowded theater. Okay, so there are limits on free speech.
You have a right to
safety.
speak, but you don't have a right to a megaphone.
Yeah,
right?
and you don't have the right.
Yeah, and I think that argument is
I
unsustainable.
think that certain things will happen. I think they will still be on the local level. I think the question you asked earlier about enforcement, almost every school now has a policy. The question is how best to
enforce it.
implement it in a way that really engages families, so that
But at least we're having the
Okay, we'll
conversation.
be right back.
Exactly.
Back with Inside Story. Roy, come here. Hurry up. Come on. This is Roy Hensel. He has been our studio manager. Sit down. Sit down.
Oh, in the hot
You can
seat,
sit in
Roy.
the
In
seat.
the hot seat.
Official.
This is his
Right.
last Inside Story. He's retiring. Roy, you're our colleague and our friend. And
congratulations.
you'll all be welcome back at this table. Always.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I'm bumming.
Congratulations.
Cheers, my friend.
That's Inside Story for this week. Say goodbye to Roy.
Bye, Roy.
He's retiring. He'll be the guy sitting in front of his house with a Coors Light every night. See you later.